All right, now that I have everything disassembled, I went ahead and set it up on the bench to figure out exactly how I'm going to adapt this to the NC chassis. This is the RX-8 diff. That's the NC diff, obviously with the PPF attached. So there's two main mounting points on the differential. There's the top, which is the bracket, and the bottom portion, which is the PPF. Both of these have to be modified in order to fit it to the NC. For the bracket, a little bit of material has to be shaved off. Not a big deal. I'll go over that in a moment. For the PPF, those four mounting locations are different. So what is the difference? Why doesn't this PPF fit on the RX-8? Well, for starters, the distance from the drive shaft mating surface and this stud is basically the same on both. The distance between the studs are the same. Where it's not the same is the distance between the studs. This is actually a little bit shorter than the Miata. And then the other difference is in height. So the RX-8 diff is actually a little bit shorter as well. That surface to that surface is about 5/8 of an inch shorter. So that distance will need to be taken up with a spacer. But if you add 5/8 and the thickness of the PPF, you're not left with a lot of threads. Actually, you're basically left with no threads. I think I estimated about 0.157 of an inch, which is nothing. So what I'm going to attempt to do is take out this stud and go to Fastenal to find some longer ones. And as for the, I guess, lateral distance, that will need to be re-drilled. The holes will need to be re-drilled inwards just slightly. And honestly, those are the size difference is probably going to end up being slotted almost, like lengthened out, just to accommodate that. So let me tackle this and then we can see where we end up. I'm going to take this off and then see what it looks like. Alright, so this is where we're at currently. I took the studs out. Here's one right here. I cleaned it up before I bring it to Fastenal so they can get a replacement one a little bit longer. Went ahead and made it up the PPF to the RX-8 diff just so we can kind of see what we have to modify. I went ahead and bolted that up because remember the bottom, well, actually that's the top, those are good. But the bottom studs, as you can see, that's quite a bit of a gap. So that's where we're gonna have to make the spacer. Not sure what I'm gonna do about that locating bracket. Might delete it, might move it over because we're also gonna have to drill new holes. I don't know if you can see that, but right there, right where my finger is, that is the stud hole, right? So we're gonna have to move that back just a little bit right here and here. Either slot it or re-drill new ones. So for the new stud that I'm gonna get, it will have to be much higher because as you can see, the old one has barely any threads left for engagement. So we're gonna have to get a taller one. That's some math to figure out where I was at before, but the assembled height of everything, the assembled height with the PPF is a little over an inch. And then the nut, factor in the nut, that's 0.65. So for a total assembled height of about 1.7. So yeah, that's where I'm at. So I need to go to Fastenal, get the new bolt, make a spacer. Let's see, get that bracket a little bit relieved in the back, and then we're good to go. All right, so I was unable to find studs at the exact height that I needed. So what I decided to do is just ordered a bolt that I think should work. Anybody else that needs to do this, it's M14 by 1.5. If you can find a stud of the correct height, that's great. I was unable to do that, so I ordered some bolts to replace those studs. I went ahead and put them in there just so that I could measure the difference between these two studs on the RX-8 diff versus these two studs on the Miata diff. It's about 0.7 of an inch difference. So I went ahead and put this in the mill, and I'm going to re-drill these holes. I'm going to just back it back off about 0.7. I did take the bracket off. I think I'm going to reuse the bracket just as it has that locating pin. I kind of like it. We'll see how this works out. All right, so I went ahead and drilled the PPF. I did drill the hole for this bracket. I didn't drill the hole for that pin yet. I'm not sure if I need it, but anyway, I put the studs back in, but I didn't thread them in all the way just to kind of check fitment, and everything fits fine. In a pinch, you could probably honestly use these and just Loctite those in there. So now all I got to do is make the spacer and wait for those bolts to come in, and then put it back in the car. Alright, so the bracket is now cut down. I did have to relieve a little bit more material on this side. It's not 100% square under there, as well as beveled the back edge to match the PPF curve. And as you can see, I have my hole locations right there already marked. I just put it underneath the car, in the PPF, between the PPF and the diff, and then I just ran that bit in those holes just to mark them. And then I'm going to go ahead and put these through, and I might do the center one, we'll see. Alright, this is the finished bracket right here. I put a little bit of a bevel on it, rounded that edge, just to make it fit a little better. Those holes, they should work fine. I'm going to throw it in the car and see how everything mounts up. Alright, now that we're just waiting on our bolts, I'm not sure if I explained this or not, but this is the bracket obviously that holds the differential to the rear subframe. This right here needs to be relieved a little bit. It doesn't quite fit, it doesn't quite sit flat. You can see right there, quite large gap. Not much needs to be taken off, but a little bit does. I'm just going to put in my vise like that. I have a grinder right here. I have a grinder right here. That's the aluminum bit that we use. You could probably use a Dremel for this, but whatever you got, you just need to relieve some of that material. So let's get started on that. Alright, this is the final product after grinding. As you can see, I kind of tried to leave as much material around those embossed areas, whatever you want to call it, as I could. So before I started taking off material, that was 2.180 wide. I took it down to about 1.965 at its lowest. So I took off about 0.215 of an inch, so less than quarter of an inch taken off at the lowest point, which is right there. Up at the edges, obviously I left a lot more material, so it's basically just taking out this one structural rib right here. But I'm not going to be too concerned. Obviously I'm going to be taking this apart and looking at it as time goes on, but yeah, so let me mount it up, show you guys that it is good. Now I did it pretty close. It's actually not touching on any of those places, even if it might look like it. And hopefully that helps explain exactly what we need to do here. And then obviously that's basically it for this part. So let me bolt that up. Alright, I wanted to go ahead and get some preliminary measurements of the distance from the ground to the transmission, the PPF, the X-brace to the PPF, as well as the differential, the drive shaft mounting surface, and the angle of the drive shaft itself, just so I can base it on where I'm at with the RX-8. Alright, so after I took all the measurements with the NC setup, I decided to go ahead and mount up the RX-8 diff. I didn't actually get that on camera. I should have, but I've taken it in and out so many times I don't really feel like doing it again. Top tip though, put your jack stands up higher than I have. It'll make it way easier. So after mounting it in place, the PPF actually mounts to the differential, and there's no adjustment. The adjustment is all at the transmission. It's all at the transmission right here. So I went ahead and mounted that up, but it wasn't actually going to fit, so I had to slot those holes rearward just slightly, slot them this way, and then after I slotted them backwards, it slid right into place. And then I went ahead and mounted the drive shaft as well, and everything is actually perfectly in line. The drive shaft is within 1 degree of the OEM setup. I could probably make it perfect with a little adjustment, but I think that should be fine because the NC adjustment I think is like 1.06 to 1.36 inches measured from the X brace to the PPF, which I don't have on, and that's because I measured multiple other points, which they're all perfect, exactly how it is OEM. So the transmission is at the correct height. Even the bottom of the differential, the cooling fins are at almost the exact same height as the OEM NC unit. And what's even more interesting is the NC studs actually hang down slightly lower than this whole setup will. The replacement bolts that I got are actually going to be slightly smaller, so that should be good. Let me work on the bracket and fitting that in there for the next step. Alright, so now that everything under the car is starting to get buttoned up, next step is to put the hubs and axles on. Before I do that though, I just kind of wanted to see where we're at with the ABS sensor. As you can see, it doesn't quite fit, right? But it should be fine because the clearance is, I don't know if you can see that, but clearance is exactly within spec, or should be. The only thing that isn't is that bolt hole. So I need to take this hole out a little bit more. So the Miata one bolts into the RX-8 hub. I believe it's a 5/16. Yeah, so 5/16 works pretty well. That should fit right in there. It is loose, obviously, but I'm not really too concerned about it because, like I said, the clearancing is good. I'm not going to bolt this up now. I'm going to leave it loose, and then we're going to throw this on the car, and then we can hook that up, and yeah, we should be good. Alright, so now it's time to finally put in the axle and the hub. As it's one unit together, the easiest way I've found is to get on your back, have one hand on the axle, one hand on the knuckle, and feed it into the differential without messing up that new seal. You can have the jack ready to just kind of slide into position to hold the knuckle as you come out, or you can kind of, place it on some of those connection points. And then once you get out from underneath the car, then you can work on sliding it in. Because you need to get it past that clip to pop it into place. I greased mine up so it's kind of hard to tell, but there is a little clip, and I like to line up everything so it's generally in the right place for the connection points, so I don't have to worry about fiddling with that whenever it's in place. Alright, let's do it. Everything is installed. Everything is tightened down, torqued down. Now you just gotta fill the diff with fluid. I'm using some red line pump. and 23 millimeter and 24 millimeter for the drain bolt and the plug. Then get that filled up. Battery's dead, but car is done. Exhaust is in. Yeah, so everything's good. We will go ahead and let's drive it.